this Photoshop tutorial, we're going to take a look at 30 tools or features of Photoshop in 30 minutes or less, which means I'll be spending right around a minute talking about each of them. I'm really going to try to keep it even shorter than that. I'm using a stopwatch now. First time ever. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome into this Photoshop tutorial brought to you, as always, by tutvid.com. Today it's all about 30 major tools and features in Photoshop. When I say major, I really just mean like stuff that I use a lot and stuff that I think is important if you're not that familiar with Photoshop. Stuff that's definitely going to help you, whether you're a graphic designer, photographer, web designer, you name it. If you open Photoshop and use it, there's going to be some stuff in here that you find useful. So let's, here, real quick, take a look. All right, so I've got Adobe Bridge here. I can actually just move that out of the way. Here in Photoshop, we're going to take a look at the Adjustments panel here. Now, if you don't have this, you can go Window, oh, there we go, Window Adjustments to bring this up. I'm going to concern myself with the Color Balance Adjustment layer here. Now, Color Balance allows you to adjust the balance of color in the highlights, midtones, shadows. Now, it's a good idea to begin in midtones almost always. So for this photo, I'll like boost the magenta, I'll boost the yellow a little bit and boost the red. And then I like to go highlights after midtone. Shadows I almost always do last. And I'm going to boost the yellow and the green a little bit. And then also the red a bit in the highlights. And then last but not least, we go over to shadows. And I think the shadows might need, a little red, a little magenta action, and a little blue. And I can just close my property or collapse my properties panel. Shut off my color balance adjustment layer, turn it back on, and you can see we've made quite a difference. Now, moving right along from that, I want to talk about the next big thing, which is masking. Masking, incredibly important. You're going to use it all the time, no matter what you do, but especially if you do graphic design or photography. This is a mask right here. It automatically gets added when you create an adjustment layer. Now, you can create a mask or add a mask to any layer. Let's say we have a new layer here. You can just hit the new mask icon. Boom, we have a mask. I'm going to drag that whole thing to the garbage. Here's how the mask works. If it's filled with white, it shows everything that that layer's doing. If we flip that mask from black or from white to black by hitting Command or Control I, you can see when the mask is black, it doesn't show anything that's on that layer. I make the mask white, everything shows through. So the key is going to be we want to convert this road, make it much more red. So let's do this here. We're going to real quick use another color balance adjustment. I'm going to crank the red way up and also the magenta. I'm going to go into shadows and I'm going to do the same thing, right? So there we go. We've created this intense redness, and I want to just fill this mask with black because obviously the whole photo looks terrible now. So we hit Command or Control I to fill it with black. And this is going to segue beautifully into our third tool, which is the Quick Selection tool. Now, we're going to use the Quick Selection tool. Make sure we have Sample All Layers ticked on, and I'm going to quickly drag a selection out over my path. You can see how quickly I get a somewhat decent selection of the path. I'm not worried about it being perfect right now. Once I have that selection, I can go back into my mask, and I can just fill this with white by going Edit, Fill, and choose from the drop-down menu White. Hit OK, and you can see our road is very red. Hit Command or Control D to deselect. The edges are still somewhat jagged, so you can grab something like your brush tool, and we can just size this down by right-clicking and making it much smaller. Oh, it needs to be a little bit bigger than that. Even a little bigger than that. I've got some soft edges on it, and I can just paint over the edges of my road until it looks just perfect. So that is Color Balance Adjustment Layer, Masking, and the Quick Selection tool, our first three tools. Now that we've gone through the first three tools, we only have 27 left to go. I want to let you guys know, however, before we go any further, I'm selling a course over on tutvid.com all about how to retouch images. We go pretty deep into some of this stuff. There's a link that just appeared in the video somewhere up there. Click on that. Go check it out. If you pick up a copy, thank you so much. It really helps support what we're doing here and all of that. And if not, keep watching the video because I'm not charging for this video. This video is completely free. Let's jump in and check out the next tool or feature. And that's going to be the Quick Mask option. Now, Quick Mask is right down here in the bottom of our toolbar. Before we even start doing this, I need you to double-click on the Quick Mask icon and make sure that Color Indicates is set to selected areas. Basically, this just means that whatever we paint on, and this is going to make sense in a second, whatever we paint over, that's going to become our selection and not vice versa. So make sure selected areas is what is chosen. Hit OK. Now, what we want to do, let's say, you're having some troubles in your relationship and you're looking to maybe get out of it and you're trying to clean up some old photos. So what we need to do is paint over her, and see, all this red is just appearing over her. Don't worry, this is all gonna make sense in just a second here. We can paint over her like so. Great, 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 great. This is so fast and easy. We're just looking to make a very rough selection. Obviously, you can spend as much time as you want, make the selection as perfect as you want. But the point is I can quickly just create a selection, and then all you need to do is hit the letter Q, and that area that you painted over is going to be loaded as a selection. And now that we have this selection, we're going to go on to the next feature, which is Content Aware Fill, a super powerful and kind of impressive feature, depending on the photo which you're using it with. What we need to do here, we've got our original background layer selected. It's not a smart object. It is pixels upon which we are working. Go ahead and go Edit Fill, and we're going to choose from Contents. We're going to choose Content Aware and hit OK, and watch this. It's almost going to be like she was never there. Now, obviously, we need to do a little bit of cleaning up, and that's actually great because it's going to bring us right along to our next tool, which is the Clone Stamp tool. So here's what we need to do. We need to go Select, Deselect to just get rid of our marching ants there. And I want to create a new layer here. I'm going to call this Cloning. There we go, or just clone. Let's just go with clone. And then I'm going to grab my, where is it here, Clone Stamp tool right here. And I'm going to set sample to current and below. This is going to allow me to work up on this new layer and still sample the layer beneath it. I want to do this because if I decide I don't like the clone that I'm working with, I can either throw a mask on this layer and paint some of it away non-destructively, because we can always, paint white over the mask to make it show again. Or I can just delete the whole cloning layer and start anew if I decide that it's all messed up. So here we go. We're on our clone layer. What you need to do with the Clone Stamp tool is hold down your Alt or Option key to sample. I'm going to sample right here to get these leaves, and I'm just going to paint over where it's a little blurry. There we go. That blends in nicely. Same there. And then I can come up over here, and I can just paint some of this stuff in to kind of clean up some of the mess that we have there up here in the trees. I'm going to sample from the yellow over here. Now, here's a little trick. We can set the opacity of this tool to like 50% or so. That way, we're only painting like with a mild bit of that yellow, so it's not super overpowering, but it just kind of blends it together nicely. You can see how we can paint over this stuff and just kind of blend it all together a little bit more nicely. It's not perfect, but we're trying to hammer this out really, really quickly. Point is, with a little bit of cloning mixed with Content Aware, you can do a whole lot. And you can see that in less than a couple minutes, it's almost as if the ex-girlfriend never existed. All right, we are up to tool number 7, and that is the patch tool. Now, the patch tool is particularly useful and impressive and important when you are trying to correct big blemishes in your photo. Now, unlike the Clone Stamp tool, which just does a pixel-to-pixel copy, there's no blending. The patch tool and the healing brush, which we're going to talk about much later on, the patch tool does blending for you. So it's like the Clone Stamp tool on steroids, and you kind of select things a little bit differently. Let's check it out here. I've got my background selected. I want to get rid of this dark spot here in the side of the hill. The patch tool makes this very simple. Now, the patch tool is located underneath your spot healing brush right there, patch tool, and I want to set it to patch using Content Aware, and I typically, especially with a very fine pattern, I'll set structure to 1 and color to 10. In this case, works great. So all you need to do with the patch tool, draw a selection around what you want to get rid of. We're going to drag down here, and look at that. Voila. We can do it with this dark spot as well. Boom, Command or Control D to deselect, zoom out, and you can see we've gotten rid of those little dark spots. Easier than easy, the patch tool. So now moving on from the patch tool, let's talk about levels. Now, there is a levels adjustment layer. And by the way, adjustment layers are the way to work with adjustments in Photoshop. You do have everything up here under image adjustments, but adjustment layers are really the way to go. So we're going to go levels adjustment layer, and we have the levels dialog box. Now, I'm going to attempt to explain this quickly, i.e. in less than about 45 seconds. What you can do is you can easily increase or decrease contrast with a levels adjustment here. You can drag your black point in, and that's going to enhance your blacks. Drag the white point in, that's going to boost the whites. So if you want to increase a little contrast, you drag both the black and the white point in. Boom, you got some contrast infused into your image. Now I'm going to reset that. You can also drag the output sliders in. This is going to decrease contrast. You can see how we faded the entire image because this sort of like drags the white point down and boosts the black point. And you can drag your midtone slider. You drag it toward the black, you're going to brighten everything up. You drag toward the white, you're going to darken everything a little bit. I think I'm going to darken everything kind of like that, and then I'm going to boost the black point just a little to give it just a touch of fade. And you can see here, there's before, there's after. Now, next up, we're going to talk about the pen tool, and the pen tool is a very deep, very complex tool. So let's explain as much as we can here. The pen tool is located right here. I'm going to use it in this case just to create a path. You can also draw shapes with the pen tool. I'm going to create a path here. Now the way the pen tool works is you don't just click and start dragging. The pen tool lays down a path. It works from point to point. So I click once here and then I click over here and you can see I can build a path. I'm going to undo all of this though. I also have clicked on this little gear and I have rubber band turned on that allows me to see that line between my points so I can see where I'm drawing. What I want to do is draw a curved line going up this little cliff ramp thing. So I'm going to click and I'm going to pull out tangent handles. I'm going to pull this tangent handle out like that, and then I'm going to place a point right there. I'm going to pull my path right along and pull my path right along and pull my path right along like so. And then I'm going to hit the Enter or Return key. That's going to just complete my path. And now I can come over to my Paths panel and see that I've got Work Path. I can save this by double-clicking on this, and I'm just going to call this Fire because we're going to use this to create some fire. Now, I have an entire 5-part video series dedicated to the Path tool. I'll link the first video here. You can check it out and really get in depth with the pen tool. Super powerful, super important tool. Definitely recommend checking that out. All right, so the next thing we've got is the flame feature in Photoshop. I'm going to select my fire path. I just went and created this additional path here while I was away for a second. I'm going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to call this Flames. Now, in Photoshop, there is under Filter, Render, a flame command. The key is here, it needs to be applied along a path. So I'm going to make sure I have that path selected. We can just very subtly see it there. And I'm going to make sure that I'm working on a new layer, and I'm going to go Filter, Render, Flame. And up will pop the flame dialog box here, as we can see. Now, I want my flames to look like they're coming out from underneath this cliff, so I'm going to change the angle here to something like 80 or so. Let's see what that does. And it needs to be a little bit higher than that, maybe 105, 110. Nope, it actually needs to be a little bit less than that. Let's try like 60. See what that, there we go. 60 looks pretty good. I like a length around 500 for this image. I think that'll be good. Width of about 240 is cool. I'm going to randomize the length. I'm looking to just create as realistic a flame as possible. There's all kinds of great options in here, though. I recommend you check this out and really play with the flame filter, rendering filter, whatever you want to call it. It's a really cool feature, and it creates pretty realistic fire. I'm going to custom color for the flames. I'm just throwing some orange in there as well. Hit OK, and by the way, there's an advanced tab. Hit OK, and you're going to see it's going to apply that flame, and you can see we have these flames now coming out from underneath our little hill. I can grab the move tool and just adjust this, these bit of flames here, and move it back a little bit like that. And I'll probably even duplicate the flames and put some so it looks like they're coming up out of the backside of the hill. That'll require a little masking, and we need to mask away the bottom of the flames here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw a layer mask on this layer first. I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to set my foreground color to black because we want to cover up the flames that are showing here. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller by right-clicking, size it down a little bit. I probably don't want 100% hardness, and then I'm just going to go ahead and paint away flames down here that shouldn't really be there. You can see something kind of like so. Isn't too bad. Maybe I'll bring some of that flame back. A little bit like that. That's cool. By the way, the path is still visible. You can go to your Paths panel and just click out here to make the path disappear. And then I'm going to duplicate this flames layer by hitting Command or Control J. And I want to select the layer mask and set it to just fully white. So I'm going to do that. Once I select my layer mask, my foreground color is set to white. I can hit Alt Backspace. There'll be Option Delete on the Mac. And then what I'm going to do, I want to make sure here that I've selected the flames. I'm going to grab my Move tool again, and I'm going to move this right over kind of like here. That should probably be good. That'll add some interesting visual effect. Maybe I'll go Edit, Free Transform, and I'll just rotate this flame a little bit. Or maybe I'll even bring some of these flames up from there. So, no. I'm going to right-click and choose Flip Horizontal here. Going a little off script. And we're going to do something like this for the flames coming out over the hill. And then what I'm going to do is go into my paths, load this as my selection. I just Command or Control clicked on that layer mask. I can go in here into my mask. Actually, I'll just delete the mask altogether. I'll show you a little trick. We're going to delete the mask. And now we're going to go Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal Selection. So it's going to hide everything else. And really at this point, it's just a matter of zooming in. I'm going to make sure I have my mask selected, grab my brush tool. I want to paint away the fire that is appearing over the woman. I want to make sure I'm painting with black, so set black to your foreground color. And also with a nice, I'm going to right-click, set my hardness to 0. With a nice soft-edged brush, just blend the flames back together right around there. That looks pretty good right there. And then I'm going to make my brush much smaller. I'm going to paint over the woman here. Make sure I'm painting with the color black. I'll just paint right over her, and we'll make sure that she's completely visible. and that'll look pretty cool because it'll look kind of like she's standing on sort of this precipice, and things maybe are not quite going her way. There we go, something like that. And then you can take the time to go over her arms if you like. I'm not going to do it for the sake of saving time here. But you can see we've rather quickly engulfed this little bit of hill in flames. Kind of looks cool. Now, I just want to add real quickly, if you're enjoying the tutorial so far and you would like even more tips, I have a free guide, 30 tips and tricks to working in Photoshop faster. You get it if you sign up for my newsletter. I threw a link up there in the corner of the video. You can go and subscribe to my newsletter, and that guide will be sent right to your email right away. And with my newsletter, you'll get all of the tutorial updates and everything that's coming out on tutvid.com each and every week. Let's get back to this thing. All right, so after all of that, let's talk about the next tool, and that's the type tool. Now, the type tool is absolutely essential. Here's what I want to do. Set my foreground color to white, and the type tool is this little letter T. Now, what we can do is just click anywhere. I'm going to set it to like a standard, this Trajan Pro, or Trajan Pro, however you pronounce it. I'm going to click once, and I'm going to type out the words fire, ampersand, and fire and flames, because I don't know, let's just go with that. And now I'm going to take this over, and we would put it somewhere around here probably. And I think as I look at this, maybe I want a slightly different font, which is going to bring me right to the next feature that I want to talk about here. And that feature is TypeKit. Now, TypeKit is available for free for most Creative Cloud subscribers, depending on your subscription level. You can get to TypeKit here, open up your character panel, and the character panel, by the way, you can access it window character. This is kind of like your type editing hub. You've got all these amazing settings, size of your font. If there's different weights for your font or italicization, you can do that from this little drop-down menu here. You can adjust line height. You can adjust the spacing between letters here. There's so much you can do to edit your font. You can make all of the letters capitalized right there with a nice text transform. All kinds of cool stuff you can do, and of course, change the color of your type. By the way, you can quickly change the color of your font. Whatever your foreground color is, you can hit Alt, backspace, or Option, delete, and it will set that as your type color. So I can go like light blue here. Boom, I got light blue type. I'm going to undo that, though. I want just white type. If I click my drop-down menu, I have this Add Fonts from TypeKit option. If I select that, it's going to pop me out to my web browser. Now, here on TypeKit, you can browse for all kinds of different fonts as long as you have access. And you can see here, like this font in my plan. And then this one is in my plan or to buy. And so some of them are totally free. Some of them you may have to spend some money on. But for the most part, there's tons of free, super high quality fonts. I know the one that I'm looking for is called Fat Frank, I believe. Let's see here. Maybe I'll try that as one word, Fat Frank. And there we go. We've got Fat Frank, and it's a regular bold italic font. You can download it, or you can just choose to sync. Now, I've already synced it with Photoshop, so my only option is to unsync it. But once you sync it and you go back to Photoshop, it's going to appear in your list of fonts. Now, you can hit the little TypeKit icon up here to display only TypeKit fonts. Voila, there's Fat Frank. Great. So we've got Fat Frank. I want to make this a little bit larger, so I could choose from the drop-down menu, but it only goes up to 72 points. So I'm going to make this like maybe 150 points. And then you can see my text is like crushed on top of each other. So I need to increase the line height. Maybe I'll make the line height like 125 points. That's pretty cool. Something like that looks pretty good. And at this point, you probably are going to want to align this type to something in your image. Now, I'm thinking I'll align it right to my horizon, but I can actually make it snap to the horizon if I use a guide. So I am going to go View Rulers. Note the hotkey Command or Control R. It's going to make your rulers appear. From your rulers, you can drag out guides. So I can just click on my ruler up here and drag a guide out and drop it. Bam, right there on my horizon. And if I go View, Snap to, and make sure Guides is checked on, all you have to do is click it, but it is checked on already. What I can do is drag my type up, and it will snap right to that line. Now, I think my text is maybe just a little bit too big, so I'm going to make it maybe like 135 point. That looks a little bit better. And then snap it right down to the guide I placed. Great. When you're done with the guide, if you select the Move tool, you can hover over the guide and just drag and drop it way out, up, or off screen somewhere, and it'll disappear. Hit Command or Control R to make those the rulers, disappear. Now we're going to move on to Smart Objects. I think here I'm just going to set the blend mode of this to like overlay and see what that looks like. I mean, not perfectly what I want, but kind of cool, I guess. It's a little different, so I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to merge all of my layers to a new layer using the hotkey Command-Shift-Option. This would be Control-Shift-Alt on the PC and the letter E. See, all those layers, bam, they're mashed up into a new layer. And then I'm going to right-click on this layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. The reason I'm doing this is because, like, if you convert this to a smart object and you say, you know what, I want to size it way down tiny, and then you realize, shoot, no, I want this to be 100% exactly the way it just was. We can do that, and you can see there's absolutely no blurriness. We lose no clarity of detail, nothing like that. But also what you can do with a smart object, let's just type out smart object here. One of the other things you can do with smart objects is use filters on them, and filters become smart filters. So let's go ahead and apply and this is the next feature here, what we call a field blur. So we're going to go Filter, Blur, Gallery, and apply a field blur. Now, field blur allows us to drop these pins and blur or sharpen specific parts of the photo. So let's say I want the pinnacle here to be absolutely sharp. So I'll set the blur of this point to 0 pixels. And then I'll create a blur like right here, and maybe I want to increase this blur to like 40 pixels or something, make the foreground very blurred, 38 pixels, something like that. That's cool. And then I'll set another blur down here, and 15, well, you know what, actually it probably technically is a little closer to the camera. So let's go like 40 or 50 pixels on the blur. But then we want the water to be relatively clear again. So we're going to throw 2 points in the water, and each of these, maybe 3 points. Each of these points is at 15 pixels. That's great. And then we're going to come up here to Fire and Flames, and we're going to set the blur to 0, so it would become completely sharp up here again by the time it got to the word fire. And what else should we do? Maybe we'll kind of stave off the blurriness up here. We'll make this only about 8 pixels, and also right around here, let's reduce the blur here to like 5, 6, 7 pixels as well. And then we can hit OK. So what you can do with field blur is create these very complex blurs, and Photoshop will go and apply it. You can see we've got this crazy looking blur that's all over our image. But most importantly, if we hit this little drop down arrow here beside our smart object, we can see we have this blur gallery. That is our field blur. We decide we don't like it, you can hit the little eyeball, shut the blur right off, hit the eyeball, turn it back on, or you can double click on the word blur gallery, and you can go in and edit the blur all over again. Like maybe this really needs to be a little bit more blurred in here, so we'll come in here and just blur it even more until it kind of matches what's around it, if we so desire. I can throw something else in there to kind of loosen the blur up a little bit there. Hit OK, and we've edited and adjusted our blur. That's field blur. It's a really, really cool and powerful way to apply blurs to your image, especially when you want to generate extreme emphasis. Now, this isn't the most beautiful blur, but the point is it's a smart filter that you can go back and edit and adjust as you wish. I know we're moving quickly here, but I hope we're having fun. Let's talk about curves. Curves, personally, probably my absolute favorite feature in Photoshop. I could talk about it for an hour, but I've got a minute. So let's check this out. I'm going to real quick hide, or maybe I'll just straight up delete the layer. We really don't need it anymore. I'm going to add a curves adjustment here. Curves adjustment layer, I should say. Now, here's the curves dialog box. It looks very bizarre. Basically, here's how it works. You click anywhere on this line to add a point. Once you've added a point, you can click and drag upward. It makes your image brighter. Click to drag downward. It makes your image darker. Now, we have this histogram overlay as well. Over here, this represents the darker pixels in the image. See, there's a lot of dark pixels in this image. And then these are the midtones through here, and these are the bright parts of the image. So if I look here and I say, you know what, there's too much brightness, I can grab like this point here, the white point, and drag downward. And you can see how it simultaneously darkens my image and reduces contrast. And I can do the same thing here with the dark point. I can grab the black point, I can drag upward, and it brightens the image. But as I flatten my curve line out, I'm reducing overall contrast. So remember that. If you flatten your curve line, you reduce contrast. If you make it steeper, so like if I click here and pull down on the darks, and then I click up here and pull up on the brights, I've made it steeper. You can see how it's steeper than the original. That's going to increase contrast. See, there's before, there's after. I'm going to actually just get rid of this. What I think I'm going to do here is reduce overall contrast. I'm going to drag the black point up, drag the white point down. I kind of like that. Kind of cool. And that's a very, very basic crash course in curves. You can search through my videos. I've done 3 or 4 videos on curves. Amazingly powerful tool. You can do all kinds of color correction and just so much with curves. It's really pretty fantastic. Now, moving on along from curves, we have an eyedropper tool here in Photoshop. This is a pretty cool tool. You can see it's just showing me sampling white. You can just click it. The reason it's showing me sampling white is because I'm on an adjustment layer right now, and it's basically sampling off of the mask here. If I go to any other layer, like the text layer beneath, I can sample all of these different colors. Now, it's a very smooth transition of color. See that the color on the top half of the inner ring, that's the color that I'm sampling. The reason it's so smooth is because I'm actually sampling sampling on what's called a 101 by 101 average, where Photoshop, wherever you click, it takes a 101 by 101 pixel square and averages the color in that box, and that's the color that the color sampler picks up, or the color eyedropper. You can go all the way back to just a straight point sample where it's going to give you the exact color you're clicking. That's usually how I work. One of the other cool things I should point out here is if you click with this tool in the Photoshop interface and then you drag out over other applications, you can see here I can sample the green in my Google Chrome TypeKit window, and I have that green. Don't mind Photoshop's UI tripping out on us there. And I can get the green that I just did. Now I just clicked with the eyedropper again, so it just gave me this kind of beigey, maroonish, whatever color there in the sky. But with the eyedropper, not only can you sample colors here within Photoshop, but if you start clicking and dragging in Photoshop and drag out and over a different application or your desktop or literally anything on your screen, you can sample colors right off of that. Particularly useful if you want to sample exact colors from like a movie you're watching or another photo you're looking at, something like that, or just maybe a totally different web user interface, anything like that, you can do it with the eyedropper tool. Pretty stinking cool. Now, speaking of the eyedropper tool and color, there's a pretty cool tool that Adobe has called Adobe Color. It's color.adobe.com. You log in with your Adobe user ID, you're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Explore option. You can choose any of these colors. I'm going to go with Flat UI here. Hit Info, and you can choose to save this to your library. When that happens, Photoshop or Adobe Color is going to say, hey, where would you like to save it? You can name the theme. I'm going to say save it to my library, but specifically save it to my Color Schemes folder within my library. I'm going to choose Save. And what it's going to do is it's going to sync itself up to my libraries here in Photoshop. Sometimes it takes a minute. Oh, there we go, Flat UI. It just appeared. But you can get to your Libraries panel, Window Libraries, and you can bring whole entire color schemes into Photoshop with one click or two clicks once you've found the color scheme on Adobe Color. Adobe Color, don't sleep on it. Very powerful, very useful, especially if you're not good with color. Now I want to give you guys a quick bonus tip. Let's talk about the gradient map adjustment layer. So you can add a gradient map by just clicking on the gradient map adjustment layer, and then you can edit the actual gradient in your gradient map by clicking on this gradient stripe. Once you're in here, you double click on a color stop, you choose a color, there you go. This is going to be mapped to the darker pixels of the image, and then go ahead and choose like another color here, and that's going to be mapped to the brighter parts of the image. Hit OK. We've created this gradient map. Looks kind of cool. You can mess around with blend modes, maybe set it to multiply blend mode, and you get kind of a cool colorized, stylized effect. The reason I'm talking about gradient maps is because here in the next feature that we want to talk about in Photoshop, we're going to talk about creating actions. And we're going to create an action that uses a gradient map. So you can create an action by opening up the Actions panel here, and you'll probably have one or two folders or something like that. You can go Window Actions to open up your Actions panel. I want to just choose Create a New Action. When I do that, I'm going to name this one Temp. Maybe I'll just say Temporary. And I'm going to save it to the set or folder called Default Actions. That's what set is. You can set a function key, which is like a hotkey. You can give it a color if you want. I'm not going to mess with that stuff right now. And then I'm going to hit Record. All right. At this point, everything you're doing in Photoshop is being recorded. If you save the file, it's going to be recorded. Everything you do, it is being recorded. So here's what we want to do. We want to create first a curves adjustment layer, and we want to reduce contrast. So drag the black point up, drag the white point down. All right. We want to reduce contrast because we're going to apply a gradient map, which is going to increase contrast here. We're going to edit this gradient map here. Double click on this color here. And by the way, if you want to use a color here that we have here in our color picker, you can hover over it and you can see BD, see the hashtag BD4599. That is the hex code for it. So we can say BD4599, and we get that pink for our shadows. And then let's say we want this R, or maybe we want the bright green for our highlights, ADFF52. So we can double click here. We can choose ADFF52, and we get that super bright green. We can hit OK. I think that pink needs to be a little bit darker. So maybe let's make it like super duper dark, maybe a little rich, more rich than that. Hit OK. So we have kind of this like purple to green. And then we would set the blend mode here to soft light. And that's going to sort of infuse a little bit more contrast and color. At this point, we can stop recording our action. We've just created this action called temporary. What is it going to look like? Well, let's jump back to this image here. Let's delete both of our adjustment layers, and we just simply select the action, choose the play button, and you can see instantaneously a curves adjustment layer, which is reducing contrast, right? It's reducing the contrast, and then our gradient map are both applied to this image. There's before, there's after. So we're just kind of like changing the color. It's like a little bit of color grading and contrast bump that we've given this image, and it took just a click. All we had to do is click the play button. So using actions can be a huge time saver. I'm just going to shift click both of those layers, hit my delete key to get rid of them. All right, now last but not least, I want to take a look at the crop tool. Now the crop tool is really cool. It allows you to do exactly what it says, cropping, but one of the neat things about it is you can set a specific width and height, and not only will Photoshop crop your document, but it'll also automatically resize it. Now if you don't want to do that, you can crop according to a ratio, which is like a 1:1, which is a square. You could do something like a 4:3. You could do a 16:9. You could do like the cinematic widescreen 2:3:9:1. You could do all kinds of things like that. You can use the ruler tool in here and drag it across something that should be flat, and it will straighten your image. All you have to do is hit the little check icon. But one of the other things that's really neat about this is you can choose to delete or not delete cropped pixels. What does this mean? Well, if I don't delete cropped pixels and I commit this crop, well, we've cropped our image, right? Kind of, but we can always click and bring up the crop tool again, and we have all of those original pixels still there. We haven't actually deleted them. Another cool thing, by the way, is you have all these different, golden spiral grid, the triangle grid, the diagonals, all kinds of different things, so you can line up and really fine-tune the composition and straightness of your image if you like to really get down and dirty with that stuff. You can always choose clear to clear your crop. You can undo. I can just Command or Control Z to undo my crop and get rid of it altogether if I don't want to save the crop. Now, guys, I know we're flying through this. We are pounding away at it. I'm trying to get through this as fast as possible. We're probably still going over the 30, 35-minute mark that I kind of had in mind initially, but I just want to take a moment and let you guys know, hey, look, if you're enjoying what you're seeing and you want to see more stuff like this, hit that little red subscribe button. You'll never miss another video that I put out. I always try to put out the best of the best quality when it comes to Photoshop and Lightroom and video editing, and I'm going to be getting into some photography stuff soon. Make sure you subscribe. You'll never miss a video. We got 10 more tips here to cover, so let's get back to checking this stuff out. All right, so remember before I said that if you selected any of these colors in your color library while you had a type layer or a shape layer selected, it would change the color. I just want to show that to you real quick. You can create a new shape. You grab any of the shape tools. I'm going to go with the rectangle and make sure that I'm drawing a shape. It's got a fill. It's going to be like a very light gray. I can just draw the rectangle out here, grab my move tool. I can move it wherever I like, maybe right there. And then I'm looking at it. I don't really like white. I want to go through my color palette here, see what that red looks like. Oh, wow, look at that. I just click on the color, and it automatically will change the color of the fill. I can go to a different color palette altogether or color scheme. And you can just start flipping through the different colors you've brought into Photoshop, and that quickly you can change the color of a shape of a text layer. It's so fast. It's so easy. It's so amazing. You're absolutely going to love it. And now you know about it. All right, this is going to be fun. We're going to talk about 3D. Let's convert this to 3D and just sort of render it and lay it flat on this sort of pinkish gradiated floor here. I want to right-click on my text layer and choose to convert it to a shape. Now, from a shape, I can right-click and choose New 3D Extrusion from Selected Layer. It's going to say, look, you're switching to the 3D workspace. Are you okay with this? Yes, absolutely. We want to do this. And you can see we've got our 3D object. Now, I'm going to change the extrusion depth to something more like 120 pixels. It's just that the grayness on the back of the letter, sort of the depth of the letter. And I'm going to right-click on my view here and choose to view this from the top. You can see here we are. We're looking at the very top of the letters with our shadow doing its thing. I'm going to choose this coordinates option in my properties panel. And I'm going to, I believe it's the X. Yeah, the X rotation. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, and that's going to essentially lay my text down. Now, part of the problem here is if I right-click and go back to looking at this from the front, the text is actually hovering above the ground. So what I want to do is go back to my coordinates and say, hey, look, move this object to the ground. Move to the ground. Boom. It sets it down on the ground. Very cool. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go back to the top view here because now what we need to do is adjust our light. Because, see, we're casting a shadow up. I want to cast the shadow down and to the left. So I'm going to, down here in my 3D panel, I have environment, scene, current view, infinite light. That's our light source right there. So I'm going to click on the light source because I want to work on the light source. I'm going to grab the little ball here, and I'm just going to rotate kind of like that. That's probably enough shadow, right? We got to remember 120 pixel height. That probably looks pretty good. We can intensify or soften our shadow, or intensify the light, excuse me, or soften our shadow. Cool. I'm not too concerned about that. I want to change the color of my text. So I'm going to choose Fire and Flames, and I want to choose the front inflation material. This is the front piece of the text. Actually, before I do that, select the whole Fire and Flames bit, and let's choose this option right here. This is the cap or the bevel options for the sides. I'm going to set a width of about 10%. Just going to have this nice little crisp bevel all around the edges. It's just another edge to catch light and add to the three-dimensionality of this bad boy. We're going to go front inflation material here, and I'm going to choose from diffusion here, I'm going to choose a nice orange color, something like that, and hit OK. And we didn't see any change. So what we want to do is select this little folder and choose Remove Texture. And you can see now we have a nice orange color for our type. The bevel is still a very, very bright white, so we can even choose front bevel material. Again, we'll just go Remove Texture and select from the diffusion some other kind of yellowish orange. Maybe we'll give it like a golden yellow color, hit OK. And once we've done all of this, we can go ahead and choose to render our 3D object. Now, this is going to take a quick second in Photoshop, depending on how fast your machine is. This could take 5 minutes, it could take 20 minutes. It'll take a couple minutes here, but I'm going to speed right through it, and we'll be right back. And we can see here that our render has finished, and it still looks all kinds of crazy, but the render is basically making it just more beautiful, smoothing the colors, getting rid of noise, cleaning up edges, making it look more finished. And this all depends on the depth of what's called your ray trace. Google it. I don't want to get into it here in this tutorial. Again, we're just trying to breeze through this stuff, and we spend a little bit too much time probably on 3D as it is. But we have all the grid lines and everything around because we're still in the 3D workspace. Now, what are workspaces and how can I change them in Photoshop? Well, your workspace is controlled by this little button up here. You can also go Window Workspace, and you can see we're in the 3D workspace. Now, I have a custom TutVid workspace, which is the workspace that I typically work within, but you've got all kinds of different workspaces here. And if we go to like Essentials, you're going to see that, well, our stuff didn't go away because we still have our 3D layer selected. If I select Background, all that stuff just disappears, and we've got our 3D type. But you can see our workspace, most importantly, changed quite drastically. If I select here and go to TutVid, we can see we go back to my favorite, my default workspace. Now you can create your own workspace by just clicking that down arrow and choose New Workspace after dragging your panels around and placing them wherever you like. Go ahead and changing the color of your user interface, whatever you want to do. And then you can just go New Workspace. Or if you make a big mess of your workspace like this and you drag and junk everywhere, making a big mess of the place, you can go ahead and just choose Reset Workspace or Reset TutVid in this case, and it's going to, boom, move everything exactly back where it needs to be. Custom workspaces, very, very helpful, and it just kind of helps make Photoshop feel a little bit more like home. So check this out. We can apply a camera raw adjustment to an object, an element that has no business being affected by camera raw. See, if we shot this photo as a raw photo, of course we can open it in camera raw and edit it all day long. But what about 3D text? What about something like this? Or what about any object in Photoshop for that matter? I'm going to right click on this 3D object and just choose to convert it to a smart object. It's just like best practices before I go and apply any filter. I like to just convert to a smart object. Then I can go Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And up will pop the Camera Raw dialog box with my 3D type, and I can do stuff like change the temperature of the type. I can add clarity if I want. I can change the whites or the highlights or the contrast, or I can go in and add some sharpening if I want. I can apply curves directly to my 3D, or I can sort of distort the 3D a little bit if I want to do something like that. Maybe apply some distortion. I can hit OK and bring it back into Photoshop, and my Camera Raw adjustment has been applied. Now, of course, it's a smart filter, so if I don't like it, I can always shut it off and get back to whatever I had before, or double click and edit the Camera Raw filter as well. Very important here. This Camera Raw, mainly, obviously, you're going to use it on photos, but every once in a while, that little temperature slider can be very, very underrated. Just being able to slide between the blues and the oranges, warm or cool a graphical element or an object within a photo, extremely useful. The Camera Raw filter, highly recommended. So naturally, after you've created your artwork, the next thing we want to take a look at is exporting it from Photoshop, because you can't upload like a .psd to Facebook or your website and display it. You can do this by going File, Export. If I can land on the File menu, there we go, File, Export. You can quick export as a JPEG. This, by the way, you can change this in the export preferences, or you can choose Export As. It can be kind of glitchy, Export As, but there's a ton you can do in Export As. You can resize your image. Let's say you need 2048 pixels by 1336 pixels for a specific Facebook project. You can input it in that dialog box. Boom, export it. You can export it as a PNG, a JPEG, a GIF, whatever you want. You can export a 2x, a 3x version for Retina displays and Retina devices, depending on what you're working with. If it's for web user interface type stuff, or just application user interface, whatever, UI stuff in general, you can export those Retina graphics, boom, right off the bat. Really, really cool. If you are not interested in all of that, you can just choose the standard legacy save for web dialog box. You can choose to save it as a GIF, a JPEG, PNG 8-bit, not the greatest, or PNG 24, much better. Slightly higher file size, but a much more high-quality image. JPEG, you choose the quality, whatever you like, and you can change the image size here as well. And then you go ahead and choose Save. Choose where you like to save it on your hard drive. boom. You can export anything just like that, and whatever you see here in Photoshop is what will export as that JPEG or PNG or whatever you choose to save it as. And you know what? Let me just show you a quick bonus tip here. You can right-click anytime you like out here in this colored area and change the color of the artboard area. Light gray. You go custom and really torment somebody. You can see you got yellow. And if you want to change it, just go select custom color and, you know, hot pink or something. Ridiculous. Whatever it may be, that's just kind of oppressive. I tend to like working with dark gray. And by the way, Command or Control K will open up your preferences. You can choose interface and change the overall color of your interface as a whole. Again, I like working dark. I think it just looks better with my images. I can kind of see contrast and all kinds of things like that when it comes to working with my images. So I like working with a darker interface, but I know some people prefer light interface. Just a quick side bonus tip. All right, moving along. Let's talk about color range. Now, color range is located up here under Select Color Range. Color range allows you to go ahead and select a particular part of your image based upon the color. So let's say the client looks at this photo and they say, hey, look, we love it, but can the basil be a little bit more green? It's got a little too much yellow in it. So what we can do is come into color range here. I'm going to drop my fuzziness, and I can just click with my eyedropper on the basil leaves. We can see it's sort of starting to come along. I can hold down my shift key and click a few times around the basil leaves, and it's going to select more of those greens. Great, it's looking good. I can then start increasing the fuzziness slider, something like that, and we can select most of our basil leaf here and get most of these greens selected relatively quickly. Hit OK. You can see it's going to load them as a selection. It's not a perfect selection, but we've got the majority of those greens. We even got some green in the stems over here. If we don't want any of those greens, we can grab our lasso tool here and set the lasso tool to the subtract from selection and just drag over those tomato stems. Boom, selection is gone. Most importantly, at this point, we can go ahead and throw a hue saturation adjustment layer. It's automatically going to convert our selection to a mask, and then we can shift the hue a little bit. You can make it a little bit more green and then pump up the saturation as well, maybe make it a little bit darker. And you can see there's before and there is after. So we're making our basil leaves a little bit more green. So moving along from color range, we only have a few more options and tools to look at in Photoshop. One of the ones that I want to cover is a somewhat controversial tool. It's a newer tool in Photoshop. Some people have a lot of difficulty with it. We're going to play around with it here. It's called Select a Mask. Select a Mask. Before we get to Select a Mask, though, we obviously want to cut this young lady out. I want to go ahead and make a selection because Select a Mask tends to work better when you make a selection. So we're going to use our good old quick selection tool that we learned about earlier, and I'm going to just drag up over her body. And there we go. Something like that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go select and mask, and you're going to see here that it started cutting her out, but the hair is unnaturally sharp and straight. The rest of her clothing isn't too bad. We're going to use this top tool here. This is sort of like the selection tool. In fact, if we hover over it, we can see the exact name. Photoshop will. There we go. Quick selection tool. Now I want to get rid of the background here underneath her arm. So I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and just click once. See, boom, it just knocks it right out. Click once, bam, knocks it out. Not perfect. You can see it's a little janky there, but again, we're not gonna strain at hairs here, literally or figuratively. All right, now I'm going to choose the Refine Edge brush. The rest of the brushes I don't use that much. The regular brush you can literally just paint over, and you're adding to the selection. See, I'm just painting out here. It's kind of laggy and slow. Or you can subtract from a selection by just setting it to the minus option and just slice in to get rid of part of the selection. I want to worry about the Refine Edge brush. I'm going to right-click, make the size a bit larger. Even a bit larger than that. There we go, something like that. And we're going to use this, and we're going to paint over the edge of her hair. So you can see kind of just like that, and it looks like it's making a mess of it, but you can see it's doing not too bad of a job. Her neck's a little see-through, so we can hold down our Alt or Option key and just paint over her neck a little bit and just bring back all of the opaqueness of her neck, and we'll just also paint on the inner part here of her hair to make sure we're not losing her hair. All along here, it's pretty sharp. I'm just going to paint over it very lightly with the brush. You can see I'm not even brushing over the edge entirely. The reason is if I right-click here, you can see the hardness of my brush is set to 0, so I know that there's like fluffiness coming off the edge of my brush, and that little soft edge is just going to touch the edge ever so slightly and just apply a little bit of like that refined edginess to the edge and try to make the edge of hair, because hair in particular, the edges of hair blend with the surrounding environment. And if something looks a little bit too crazy or we're cutting away parts of her hair, hold down the Alt or Option key and just brush away a little bit. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger here. All right, I'm going to paint over this part of her hair. I'm going to paint in over this part of the hair, and you can see we've knocked out all of that background stuff. Hold down my Alt or Option key, paint in this part of her hair, make sure we're keeping that part of the hair nice and solid. And it's not perfect, but I think it's going to work here. I think we have enough that will do a decent job. And what I want to do is bring the properties panel for select a mask back on screen here. And we have all these different properties we can choose from. I'm not going to mess with edge detection. The only thing I'm interested in here is I want to shift the edge backward a little bit. I'm sorry, probably like negative 35-ish. Well, maybe that's a little bit too much, actually, now I'm looking at it. Around negative 15, negative 20. And I'm going to choose to decontaminate colors, and we're going to output this as a new layer with layer mask. So we're not just creating a selection, we're going to create a whole new layer with a layer mask automatically applied to it. I'm going to go here with my refine edge again, maybe shifting the edges a little bit. Oh, no, there we go. I just redid that in there. Hold down my Alt or Option key and paint away. You can see it's just the whole interface is a little laggy, but you just learn to get used to it. There we go. That's kind of cool. All right, now the edges of her hair, far, far, far from perfect. All right, something like that should be good. We'll go ahead and hit the OK option, and you can see new layer with a layer mask. I'm going to grab my move tool now. We're going to drop her over into the Fire and Flames artwork image right here. I'm going to drop her in there. It's going to say, look, it's got a different depth, bit depth. It's because this is a 16-bit image, and we're dropping it into an 8-bit image. No big deal. And you can see it did an okay job. I mean, there's still definitely some haloing and some color along there. We could spend more time in Select and Mask and really clean that up. But all things considered, not really a horrible job from Select and Mask. That's Select and Mask. Big tool, big feature, very important feature because you're going to use it whenever you're working with complex selections in Photoshop. So it's important to get in there and hack around with it a little bit and really figure it out. I should just add real quickly, if you are an older Photoshop user and you absolutely hate Select and Mask, I'm just going to Command or Control click on my mask there to load it as a selection. Turn on the original layer. If you absolutely hate Select and Mask and you want the old Refine Edge, you can go Select and hold down your Shift key and click on Select and Mask, and you're going to get the old Refine Edge dialog box, which is kind of what I prefer anyway, but Select and Mask is the new way to go, and hopefully Adobe continues to improve upon it. So I want to show you Select and Mask, but know that if you know what Refine Edge is and you've used it, it is there for you as well if you absolutely need it. All right, so let's go back to this image with her. I want to play around with Liquify, but as we've done before, I'm going to maybe I'll move her above the contrast adjustment layer. And I want to go ahead and right-click on this layer and just choose Convert to Smart Object because we're going to play around with the Liquify feature. Filter, Liquify. Now, Liquify is like the feature nobody really likes to admit they're using because it's what you use to make yourself look thinner or bigger or add muscle or add, anything else that needs adding in a photo. The basics of this image are the forward warp tool. This is really what you're going to be using most of probably when you come in here. Generally, the rule is, like if I want to adjust her cheek, I want a brush about this size, something that is big. So I can just push her cheek in gently, push her other cheek in gently. And the key with this tool is you really don't want to see the difference. When you commit the change, if you can't really tell you've done anything, you've done a good job. You don't want it to be something where it's like, look at how skinny I am, guys, and look at how broad my shoulders are. I've really been hitting those delts lately. Anything like that's ridiculous. And oh, by the way, if you do mess an image up this badly, you can always hit the Restore All button, and it's going to bring everything back to normal. One cool feature that I'd be remiss if I didn't show you is the new Face Tool feature, which allows you to literally select features on somebody's face. Like I can make her eyes bigger, I can rotate her eyes a little bit left or right, and it's going to go ahead and just correct and move things. I can push her nose up a little bit, make her nose a little more narrow, make her face a little more narrow or more wide. I think she's got. I like her face kind of wide. Got to keep the chin low. Maybe we'll pinch the face in a little bit. Bring her hairline down a little bit, bring her jawline in. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this face tool, and it automatically is going to detect faces in your image. Sometimes you have to rotate the image a little bit to help Photoshop pick them up, but here you can see obviously it just picks this face right up and does what it's got to do. I'm going to hit OK here to commit those changes, and of course, if you don't like the changes, it's a smart filter, so I can either shut it off or I can double-click on Liquify to go in and adjust further the Liquify that I did and make it just right. So now that we've covered Liquify, we're coming down the home stretch. Two final tools. I want to talk about the Healing Brush and the Rotate View tool. Healing Brush first. Let's create a new layer and let's call this Healing. So the Healing Brush is what I like to use when I'm just doing general retouching. You can see here we did not get a perfect cut. There's still some of the background. Try to suspend that in your mind. Remember, speed here. We're trying to fly through this and we're still not flying through it as fast as I would like. Let's just say she says, hey, look, I would like to get rid of all these spots on my face. I really don't want anything there. Certainly acne, stuff that's not going to be there in a couple weeks. We probably definitely want to get rid of that kind of stuff, just as a general rule. Not the Spot Healing Brush. We're interested in the Healing Brush tool. Now, the Healing Brush tool works a lot like the Clone Stamp tool, but we get to blend the edges of whatever it is we are cloning and healing here. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to set the hardness all the way up. Typically, when I'm retouching skin, generally, I like to have hardness set to 100. All right, we're going to set this to Sample Current and Below, again, because we're working up on a blank layer. That way, we can shut the layer off. We can turn it on. We can reduce opacity if we want. We can mask out certain areas. We have the power power to adjust is what I'm trying to say. And oh, by the way, this the model can remain as a smart object. We can't work directly on a smart object layer. See, option click to define a source point, and then I try to click and it says, look, you got to rasterize the smart object. That means we lose our filter, we lose everything. We don't have a smart object anymore. No good. We want to just create a new layer and work above our image. So healing, and what I'm going to do is Alt or Option click right here, and you can see we can get rid of this big bit of acne here in her forehead, or just, a single pimple, and we can just sort of blend things right in with the healing brush, and you can spend as much time or as little time going over this image as you like. The healing brush, though, super duper powerful. I use it all the time. It's quite impressive with what it does. Very clean and gives you great results. I just tend to prefer the healing brush over spot healing brush. It's a little bit more powerful, but you do have to manually hold down your Alt or Option key, sample a point, and then click to paint over that point to heal up whatever it is you're looking to heal. And really, this brings me to my last tool, and that is if I'm like working along this edge, I want to get rid of this hair. Maybe it's easier for me to brush side to side rather than up and down, and I really want this to be precise. Well, I can come down here under the Hand tool. I have the Rotate View tool. I can click and drag and rotate my entire image sideward like this. I can go back to my Healing Brush tool. I can sample out here and just choose to paint over that nice and clean. There we go, and maybe I too also, as well, I would like to get rid of that little line there on her face, and that line as well. And it's just easier for me to work sideward like this with, kind of longer, thin lines, which generally for me it is easier to go sideward rather than up and down. And I can use the Rotate View tool for that, and when you're done working on the side, your image isn't stuck like this forever, you go back to the Rotate View tool and simply hit Reset View. Bam! And you're back to having an image that is straight up and down. So, for all those different features in Photoshop, for removing your ex who destroyed your life, or, maybe that's how you feel about it. I'm sure she has different feelings about it. But to get her out of those pictures because you really love that shot of you for your Facebook profile, to go in and mess with levels and curves and adjustment layers and healing brushes and Adobe Color and 3D and everything else that we covered in this 30 tools and features, tips and tricks video in 30 minutes or so. It's probably going to be a little bit longer than that. That's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, TypeKit.com. I'll catch you in the next one.